This podcast is sponsored by Allianz Investment Management, LLC, issuer of defined outcome ETFs that give investors a level of risk mitigation to help them navigate current and future markets. As part of the Allianz Group, one of the largest asset management and diversified insurance companies in the world, Allianz Investment Management, LLC maintains a long track record of developing and executing risk management strategies across the globe. Investors should consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses carefully before investing. For a prospectus with this and other information, visit allianzim.com. Read the prospectus carefully before investing. Funds are distributed by Foresight Fund Services, LLC. Hello and welcome to Inside ETFs, the podcast where we bring the latest and greatest ETF industry perspectives directly to you through in-depth discussions with key thought leaders from across the ETF ecosystem. I'm your host, Douglas Yones, the head of exchange-traded products at the New York Stock Exchange, the home of ETFs. Now, today I'm joined by none other than Joanthan Krane. John is the founder and chief executive officer of KraneShares, an asset management firm with over $15 billion in assets under management, delivering China-focused exchange-traded funds to investors worldwide. KraneShares focuses on providing expert access and products for investors to gain exposure to China's capital markets. John, thank you so much for being here.
Doug, thanks so much. I really appreciate being here, and thanks for all your support and New York Stock Exchange support over the years.
So, John, every story has a good beginning. Yours begins before ETFs. So I want you to share with everyone how you got started personally working in China.
Absolutely. Yeah, no. So KraneShares is very focused on China as a company, and it really began when I lived in China. So after business school, I moved over to China in the early 2000s, and it was really just fascinated by all the opportunities that China presented as it was opening up, and really went over there as an entrepreneur and lived in Shanghai for 5 years. And was involved in a media entertainment company, actually different industry there, really helping China open up for a lot of international content leading up to the Beijing Olympics. But while living there, really got, very confident doing business in China, working with the Chinese government and met a lot of friends over there too. And just saw all these incredible growth trends happening in China, technology, consumer. A lot of it was, triggered by urbanization, all these people moving to cities, and kind of fell in love with, in an entrepreneurial way, all the opportunity happening in China. And we built up a successful consumer-focused business there, and learned a lot, and wanted to continue that effort as we moved back. And my wife and I lived over there. We actually had our first child in Shanghai. And about a year later, we decided to move back to New York City, but just had such a great experience there that I wanted to continue my work focus and career focus in doing business around China. And that's where I started thinking about, KraneShares and the asset management business. So it was really KraneShares. The beginning of it was really my 5 years living in China.
And, you and I have a bit of shared history, right? My family, we also had a chance to live in Hong Kong, spend a lot of time in China. And it is interesting, right? For the US perspective, we end up just getting these sort of sound bites and headlines about China. But until you're there and living it, it's hard to explain to someone the power and size of industry, the power and size of the economics, right? And size and scope, and frankly, willingness to push forward, right, with technology, with just about every sector. So I know you've explained some of that to me. You've seen this opportunity. What was the transition? You're talking about media companies, and now all of a sudden you're talking about ETFs. How does that happen?
Yeah, so when I got back to the States and I started really focusing more on money flows happening between U.S. and China, and China diversifying globally for the first time, and then U.S. investors very underallocated China in their portfolios. So I saw this sort of crisscross of asset flows that I thought would significantly increase going forward. And I started looking at how I could build businesses in those asset flows. Okay. And so we started as an entrepreneur looking for mega trends. And we identified two mega trends. One was China, financial markets, and really the opening up of those financial markets where global investors would have more access in. And then we also saw that China had never been included in global indexes, which we knew had to change. Second largest economy in the world has to go into global indexes like MSCI and Bloomberg. So we anticipated that would happen. So one mega trend we identified was the opening up of the China financial markets. The second mega trend was ETFs. And we saw that as a fast growing product type. And this is back in 2011 when we started looking at this. So we decided to move forward. And then as we looked at the industry, you had three major ETF companies, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. I think they dominated 90% of the industry. So how do you do an entry strategy into that type of environment? And we saw focus. If we focused on China only, okay, and we thought that was a big opportunity, but there are a lot of other companies were not that focused on it. And that's where that laser focus, we thought that we could do a market entry, and we launched KraneShares in 2013 starting to list funds on the New York Stock Exchange.
So if you're an entrepreneur listening in, I hope you caught some of those key tips about the way John and his team have continued to innovate and build and the types of strategies they're going for. And by the way, if you're not as familiar with the history of the China equity markets, by no means was anyone in 2011, maybe other than John, saying what you just said, which is, it has to open up. Those equity markets were considered closed with almost no signs of opening up. And when we mean opening up, the ability for John and his team to build ETFs that actually buy shares of companies listed in China versus buying Chinese companies listed in the US or Chinese companies listed in Hong Kong. So you were seeing a vision that I think a lot of other people in the world weren't seeing.
Yeah, Doug, I appreciate that. And it was also, I really think the importance of living in China, sort of boots on the ground for 5 years, where you really understand the culture, you see the growth trends, you see the growth, but you also, being on the ground, you see the ambition, okay? And a lot of hope in China with people there and opportunity. And then you have this 1.4 billion population that has a lot of upward mobility. Coming back to the States, I had a lot of enthusiasm and excitement where I saw that U.S. investors should own more of China in their portfolios. It would be more beneficial to U.S. and global investors to keep increasing China because I just really believe in long-term growth happening in that country. And so we started a business that really at the beginning was all about education, providing, education about China, about its markets, about its economy, about all the different exchanges that, Chinese companies are listed on and kind of figuring out and simplifying investing in China. But really the way we've looked at investing in China over the last 20 years is really you look for strong government policy. And where there's strong government policy, Chinese government policy, the Chinese government's usually investing into those themes or sectors or companies. And so that's sort of a macro way to look at it. And then you start designing products around that government policy. And that's where we listed our first fund, which is KWEB, which is now our flagship. But it was really the first fund to be a pure play around China e-commerce and technology, which was a big government policy, okay? And it's today that fund's grown a lot and performed very well, but it's really how the 1.4 billion consumers, how they're buying goods and services and communicating is through the companies that are in the KWEB portfolio.
So here we are, all of John's bets in 2011 have paid off. You've got the Chinese equity markets open, you've got the Chinese fixed income markets opened, you've got ETFs over $7 trillion invested in ETFs in the US, over 1,700 ETFs on the New York Stock Exchange. And then, of course, more and more investors realizing and recognizing what you just said, John, which is they tend to be underexposed to economies outside of the US. So tell us now, here we are, right? It's getting into the end of the year of 2021. We see a lot of these headlines about China. right? Little snippets and a lot of those are negative. Let's just put it out there. Are those opportunities? Do you sit there and see those as, hey, this is the opportunity for investors to be looking at the Chinese markets? Are those warning signs that investors should be thinking about the markets in a different way? You know, how do you see this playing out?
Yeah, absolutely. So we always approach China long term. We believe in the long term growth of China, and it's a buy and hold investment. And there will be news and volatility along the way. Okay, but long term, we think it's going to be very stable, solid growth, and just because of the trends and the data there to support that, and we've seen that in our track record of our funds too. Is this long-term growth? Absolutely, it's an emerging market. Even though it's the second largest economy in the world, will be the largest economy in the world in the coming years. It's still considered in that emerging market where there'll be volatility, and so we see when we've seen this headline news come out, it's in this sort of pullback in the China markets. We've always seen that as an buying opportunity. Okay, because it does come back and it creates very interesting entry points for investors. So something like that has happened in the last 4 or 5 months where the markets have pulled back. And this time around, we do see investors coming into China. They look at this as a buying opportunity. So there's actually, even with the pullback in the markets, a lot of inflow has come into our funds.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And if we take a step down a layer and say, okay, how about between equities and fixed income? Is your opinion the same when it comes to Chinese bonds versus Chinese stocks?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually interesting. You have the second largest equity market in the world with China, with their exchanges. But it's also the second largest bond market in the world. I think it's a $12-13 trillion bond market now, with very interesting yields being offered. Especially in the policy bank, government bond area, and then also in credits. So we think we look at China now as an asset class where you should have an equity allocation and also a fixed income allocation. That has been helped a lot by the inclusion of China in these global indexes. MSCI included the mainland A-share market in its global indexes, and now Bloomberg has included the China bond market, the interbank bond market, in its global indexes. So global investors are buying it and also creating full sort of asset allocation around China as an asset class.
And of course, for those looking at actual ETFs, you could go to KraneShares.com. John's team has put together all of their different ETFs and educational materials on their website. John, you spent the better part of 2 decades going in and out of China. I have to ask, how much Chinese do you speak? Yeah,
so I think I started trying to learn the language a little too late in life. But when I lived there, I definitely picked up some of the language and did my best to learn. But I'm not, in business situation, I'm not very conversational. I can sit in a meeting, understand a little bit, but I have my kids are learning Chinese now, so I'm giving them that benefit.
That's fantastic. Anything you want to say quickly in Mandarin to all of our Chinese?
No, I'm not gonna. It's okay.
Okay,
you do it, Doug.
One. How about just general culture, right? Or do you have a favorite food? Like, hey, I'm going into Beijing. I'm going to go get this, or I can't.
Yeah, like absolutely. So in Beijing, Peking duck. I mean, that's where it's from, and you get the best Peking duck there. So it's always a treat when we do that. So I would say that's my favorite.
How about Szechuan? How do you do with the spice?
Enjoy it. It's good. Okay. It's good. Yeah.
I said that one time, and my team took me out for like real Szechuan, and they tried to make me cry. And I'm gonna just put it out there. I cried a little bit with the spice.
I challenged you.
I enjoyed every minute of it.
That's great.
How about a funny story? Anything interesting you'd love to share with the audience about your travels in and out of Asia?
It was such a journey, and I should call it an adventure to live in China. It's just it was 5 years, and a very special time, part of my life and my wife's life. And, just the ability to, just meet, good friends from that region and just experience a lot of different cultures. So we spent a lot of time in mainland China and explored a lot of the cities across mainland China. You go outside of the Beijing and Shanghai, there's just some really interesting, beautiful places. But then also being able to go to other countries, across Southeast Asia and Greater Asia. It supported also our thesis around the opportunities in China, which also encompass Asia, as China is a big part of Asia. So we learned a lot, and we got to meet a lot of great friends there. So it will always be an important part of our life. And now I since we moved back, we travel over there at least 6 to 7 times a year too.
Yeah, so if you're listening and need travel tips, you can reach out to John to talk about his ETF travel. John, I want to go back to the ETF side, right? If you're an advisor listening in, I think it'd be an interesting question for them of, do you feel as a builder of ETFs that ETFs are bought, or do you feel as though as a builder, you actually have to go out and sell them?
Yeah, so, it's interesting. The way we started this company in 2013 was, I mentioned this before, was about education. So we approach all of our external meetings and client touch, with it's all about education and talking about all the opportunities in China, what's going on in China, whether it's good news or sometimes challenging news, but be out there with that education and be reliable source about it too. And doing it every day. So all we do is China. Like that's what we focus on. Whether the markets are up or down, we're there for clients with that education. And I think that we've built that trust now over the last 8 years that we're credible about China, but we follow through about it. I mean, that's the focus. So I don't know if we look at it as buying or selling ETFs. You provide the education, you provide the opportunity for advisors and investors. And then when you do that enough, they'll make the decision whether they see that as something that can benefit them. So, I think education is the best way to grow your business.
Do you have a favorite ETF?
Yeah. So out of our, I like all of our ETFs, and when we do, when we do product development, we really believe in the thesis of them and the opportunity and that they can play a important role within portfolios. So, our first ETF we launched was obviously it's always a special place in my heart because it's how we launched the company. And that was, the KraneShares China Internet ETF, that's KWEB. And, that's always special. I like also we're getting more focused on climate and ESG around China. And then we've also started going into the carbon space, which China will have the largest carbon credit markets. But we also have a global carbon credit fund, KBRN. But I think one of my favorite funds is KGRN, which is our China Clean Technology ETF. And again, that climate is an important global issue. China takes it very seriously, and they have ambition to be carbon neutral as a country by 2060. But again, they've created very strong government policy, to support the growth of the clean technology industry, and they have to, because you have urbanization taking place with hundreds of millions of people moving to cities. You have to create healthy green environments for all these people to live in, and lower carbon, lower pollution, and really transition into renewables. And so you create opportunities in electric vehicles, for instance, in China, where China, is the largest auto market in the world. 25 million cars are sold a year, but electric vehicles within that market is growing very quickly and adopting very quickly because of this government policy. So you'll have the largest, not only auto market in the world, but the largest EV market in the world. We want our clients to have exposures to those type of companies that are growing, and it's not just the electric vehicle companies, but it's the whole ecosystem around EV and new energy mobility, and that's around battery and other types of technologies. And then you have solar and wind and other areas where in renewables where China's growing quickly, where there's a lot of support and investment going into. So KGRN captures all that, and so that's a fund where I think can offer great returns, but also is really helping the environment.
And fun fact, if you want to know how serious John Krane is about that side of the market, when he came in to ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange for KRBN, he didn't ring the bell. He had former Secretary of State John Kerry who didn't ring the bell. So John Kerry rang the bell. Currently serving, by the way, as the first United States Special Presidential Envoy for Climate. So when John Krane is serious about building a climate ETF, he's serious about the climate ETF. Okay, I have to ask the other way, which is, you've launched a handful of ETFs, and is there any in the lineup that you look at and say, wow, this should have already taken off. People should know about this. This should be just in everyone's, thoughts or portfolio, whatever way you want to look at it. And you're just sort of surprised it hasn't taken off.
Yeah, so I'll go back. KGRN should I think should be in more investor portfolios. KGRN is our China clean technology ETF. So I just talked about that. So that is one that we really believe in, and so I kind of go back to KGRN on that question.
Got it. Okay, we're going into the end of the year, John. What should an advisor prepare for when they start thinking about how they're allocating their portfolios for 2022?
Yeah, I think there's first of all, there's a lot of long-term opportunity in China, and we think that the markets have come down a little bit. A lot of it has been news related, around China. And I think it creates interesting entry points now, value type of entry points. So, and that's both in equity and fixed income. So, I think that we've been seeing China portfolios, I should say U.S. portfolios. China, we see either 1% to 5% of the portfolio could be China. We believe that allocators should be increasing that. And you have what is China? You have the A-share market, but then you have the greater China market too. And so you have sort of your core China, and then we always believe in the thematic approach to China. Funds like K-Web, funds like KGRN, that you can create these satellites around core China, which is either your sort of A-share, which we have KBA, or your all China, like KALL. And then you build, thematic satellites around that for growth. We think, continue to build those positions. We think is going to be a smart path forward.
All right, now I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Do you know your Chinese zodiac sign?
I do. It's monkey, actually.
A monkey. Okay, now. If you look at what the personality of the monkey should be, and we read that, it says they should be things like mischievous, curiosity, and cleverness, which can sometimes make them very naughty. Does that describe Joanthan Krane?
I don't know. But I think also funny, Doug. But I think monkeys also represents optimism. And sort of like go-getter type of attitude also. And so when I've researched monkey, I think those sort of are qualities that I have, especially as an entrepreneur, and you have to stay very positive, and you have to definitely be a go-getter. So I think those are better ones around monkey.
I like it. Stay positive, lots of energy, look for the bright things in life, and go out there and make a difference, just like Joanthan Krane has. That's a wrap on this edition of the Inside ETFs podcast. Joanthan Krane, or thank you for being here to share your insights. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes featuring thought leaders from across the ETF ecosystem. I'm Douglas Yones, head of exchange traded funds at the New York Stock Exchange, the home of ETFs.